They brought her back.
You're not Ripley. Who am I?
To resurrect an alien species.
It's a queen. She'll breed. You'll die.
Now.
Ellen Ripley died trying to wipe the species out. I'm not anxious to see her taking up her old hobby.
Someone or something is gonna wish they never did. Sigourney Weaver. Winona Ryder. Alien Resurrection. Rated R.
Although edited for television, tonight's thriller contains scenes of suspense and violence which may be unsuitable for young viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Alien Resurrection #1 was released on October 29th, 1997, according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics. That was nearly a month ahead of the film's US wide release on November 26, 1997. The first issue arrived the week after Aliens Alchemy #2 and Predator vs. Judge Dredd #1, and on the same week as another 2-issue movie adaptation, Starship Troopers #1. In broader comics publishing, DC was offering their Tangent Comics 5th Week event, reimagining their line from the names of properties up. Faces of the DC Universe featured a unified cover theme throughout the month, with extreme close-ups of characters. Marvel's Uncanny X-Men reached issue number 350, still drawn by Joe Madureira, when he could not only still produce work, but on a routine schedule. Alien Resurrection #2 was released on November 12th, 1997, just 2 weeks after the first, and amazingly still 2 weeks before the film itself. DC's popular JLA franchise offered 2 new spin-off miniseries, Paradise Lost and Year One. At Marvel, Heroes Return included Wade Garney Captain America and Lobdell Davis Fantastic Four, with relaunches of Avengers and Iron Man coming soon. I'd had you down for Alien Resurrection and forgot. That was also one that you talked about. And we don't necessarily have to talk about the comic book. I get the feeling that might be one where I do something similar to what I did with the recent Terminator episode I did, where I just take a bunch of people and string them together, commenting on that, stitch together. So, Mac, what about you?
Bro, I don't remember this movie.
At all?
At all.
When
I saw Ron Perlman and what's her name?
Winona Ryder.
Winona Ryder, I was like, oh, I saw this movie. Then the more we watched,
I wasn't
sure. And then I remember the basketball thing.
Yeah. And what venue
What year did this come
movie?
out? What year did this come out?
This was, I think, 98 or 99.
I mean, I've repressed a lot of memories from those years.
Yeah,
so it's very possible I saw it.
I assure you, that was in the shop days.
Yeah.
That was
92.
in the
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Alien 3 was 92.
Yeah, I was about to say. Got a story about that.
Okay.
So, I don't remember. I think you were coming to the shop by that point, but,
This video says 6 years ago was 20 years.
Right.
So 6 years ago was 98. So, 2018, 20 years before that would have been 98.
Yeah, there you go. Sounds about right. Having read the comic book miniseries, I don't think I have an episode on it. And I made a point of not rewatching Alien Resurrection, the movie, or Alien 3 when that came up, any of the movies. I made a point of I haven't watched any of the movies since, I think, 2016, when they did the anniversary and I got a bunch of commissions to get signed by the actors and stuff. So I wanted to treat it as a comic book and maybe go for some memories. I don't think you've reread this miniseries. I don't know if you've ever read the miniseries, but if you had any thoughts you wanted to share on Alien Resurrection broadly, I can go ahead and get that down. Or if you're just like, nah, I don't want to fool that tonight, or ever, just let me know.
Alien Resurrection was a dope one because it has the clones. I remember enjoying it quite a bit, but it had a really weird ending. I remember it felt off. And I think it was kind of one of those movies too where it's kind of like, which one was the Alien, the prisoner one? But it was Alien 3, right?
Mm-hmm. This is the sequel to that one.
And I always so I always thought Resurrection was the one in the prison and the other one was called something else. So that's why I always got them mixed up. Yeah, this one was a dope one, dude. I think I saw it in the theaters.
Yeah, no, it's cool. No, I've read it. I read it in preparation for this. Alien Resurrection, I think, as I've said before, the film is a odd duck for sure, as Hollywood films go, but I mean, it's directed by a French director. That's not particularly surprising. I saw City of Lost Children in the cinema when that came out and loved it, and then saw Delicatessen after that and loved that as well. That was Jean Genet and Cara, I forget Cara's first name, but they did that together, and then this Resurrection was just Jean Genet on his own, and then of course I found out years later that it was I guess primarily Joss Whedon script, which I had no context for when I first saw that film. But no, I thought the film was great, and I don't know if you know Genet and Caro, before doing Delicatessen, did comics as well, so they had a comics background before doing their films, which are so highly visual, and then did Alien Resurrection, which I imagine, similar to Alien 3, must have had a lot of studio interference and backwards and forwards, and you can't kill Sigourney, you can kill Sigourney. There must have been a lot of that going on, the same as with Alien 3, just maybe not with a director as volatile as David Fincher.
So carry on with your thoughts on the movie.
I remember really enjoying this one. I remember the big deal was when Sigourney Weaver hits that 3-pointer from behind. She did that in one shot. Apparently, if you watch it, Ron Perlman's reaction almost ruined the scene.
They cut the scene immediately before he reacts, because when she did it in one take, he lost his shit during the filming, and they weren't going to go for another take, so they just cut it right before you could see him freak out.
But you see his eyes raise up, and that's supposed to be right when he reacted. I remember the part that really got to me was the cloning part. I thought it was strange that the ship could open doors with breath, which I thought was always a weird way to operate.
The whole movie's about finding a weird way to do shit, so that's consistent.
Well, now that we watch this, I get that now. Like, at the time, I remember thinking, that's fucking weird, but I'm like, the movie, again, like he said, was really well paced, so I remember thinking, you think a moment like that's weird, but you keep moving because it was always constantly something happening, like Ron Perlman fucking with the guy in the wheelchair, and the wheelchair guy is the one that has all the weapons when they take his legs apart and stuff. And, like, I remember really liking this one out of he keeps talking about the fourth one. To me, it's 2, 4, 3, 1.
You like one the least?
Yeah. I know it's a slow burn, but really to me, the iconic scene is when they're having dinner. But besides that, it's just a lot of like people getting got in the darkness.
End scene in the Sigourney Weaver in there.
Yeah, but
those are the two iconic.
That's a good scene.
Yeah.
Those two iconic.
You heard about that one, right? When they did the 4K, they had to reinsert CG bush hair for her.
Or erase bush hair?
No, reinsert it because they'd been taken out.
How they been taken out?
I think when they did like a remaster of it, because you could
Why
see
would
pubic
they
hair.
add bush hair? If
I want to say they added to it. I don't believe they took it off.
I think the opposite. I think
Internet,
they probably
please
had
save
some-
us.
Yeah, well, I'll look into it.
But in terms of like action, it wasn't an action movie. It was
Good cast though.
Yeah. Oh no. And that's what I'm saying. The dinner scene was great. The way they
and
were
not
acting.
just that, but watching them interact with each other in the first movie, I've worked in those kind of environments. It really does have verisimilitude. It feels like a bunch of plant workers wanting their fucking overtime and angling for extra pay and better conditions and all that kind of bullshit, bitching about I don't have this thing that I need, blah blah blah. Just it feels like people who'd work on a rig.
But it wasn't an action movie. It was a slow burn horror movie, like you said.
Yeah.
The second one, by far superior. It's G.I. Joe with aliens that everyone loved.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the argument. Most people you either prefer Alien or Aliens, and then there's the other ones.
Yeah.
That's the way most people come at it. So that's why you ranking Alien dead last is surprising to me.
No. The second one I remember seeing in the theaters. The first one I didn't see in the theaters. I saw it on TV.
Yeah.
It was edited for TV. So for the longest time.
Mom wasn't taking me to see Alien.
Yeah.
She had some responsibility.
But I remember really liking this one. But wasn't there like 2 different versions of this one?
I don't think so. I don't think this one didn't go through the kind. It's 3 that. I
thought that was
there's
3
like a
that
whole
had
other,
multiple versions.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it's 3. That's the one.
Fincher disowns 3. He does not consider
That's
that his
right,
movie. He
that's
doesn't
right.
talk
Okay,
about
so
it
that's
ever.
3.
And I've seen the work print version. It is a much different and better movie. So.
Oh, you've seen the work print?
Oh, yeah. It's available on the Aliens anthology. And actually, I think they even had it available in like one of the earlier DVDs or something. But yeah, I've seen it, and it's definitely better. It's different, but it's better. It's just they explain things better. It's longer. The opening sequence is, I think, a lot stronger, and so you get drawn into the movie more readily.
That's Alien 3, right?
Yeah, Alien 3. Not pluralized. It's Alien 3.
Alien 3.
I think he intentionally wanted to connect it to the first Alien because in terms of tone, it feels much more like the first movie. It's a slow burn just like the Alien was.
I own it on VOD. I wonder if it's on there.
See, that's the thing with the fucking digital versions. One of the reasons why I stick with physical media is because you always lose shit. You always lose commentary tracks, it seems like. Special features don't always get ported over. And especially something like that work print edition, there's, I guess, some weird rights shit, or maybe they just think there's a lack of interest. And a lot of times that stuff isn't part of those packages. Like I don't think you can stream the work print anywhere, for instance. And it might be too that maybe you'd have to get Fincher to sign off and he won't sign off. I don't know.
It's Alien 3, right?
Alien 3, that's correct.
Yeah, no, it's just the theatrical.
It's weird to me. We watched this video where it's framing Alien Resurrection as the black sheep, and it continues to laud Alien 3, and that is not my experience with Alien fans. My experience is that the polarizing movie is Alien 3. People fucking hate Alien 3. There are supporters of that movie, myself obviously included, but I know I'm in the minority. I know the vast majority of people who love the Aliens movies hate Alien 3. That is the black sheep. That is the one that you will get into fucking arguments with people over. I don't think anybody cares enough about Alien Resurrection to put up a fight for. You like it? You just put it as your like second favorite of them, but you're not going to get into a screaming match over that movie. I think you could get into a screaming match with people over Alien 3. I had people get pretty hot with me over Alien 3. So that's the black sheep. Alien Resurrection, I think that the bubble had already been burst by Alien 3. And so you like it or you don't like it, but people it doesn't ruin the franchise. Like Alien 3 ruins it because it had already been ruined. And now Alien Resurrection is just this other thing that comes along. So I was working at the second comic shop, the one where I met Fix-It and the one where you came to eventually.
97.
Yeah,
Anyway.
the 97. I did not have a vehicle at that time. And I was friendly with one of the co-workers. I talked about this a little bit on the virus episode where he was a sports guy and he only liked one comic book ever, Virus, so I had read his copies and it didn't really do much for me. But because it was like the only comic he ever loved and owned copies of, it's like, okay, I'll go ahead and check this out because it's like one little bit of common ground. But I really appreciated that, I guess, from talking about alien stuff around him, I assume, he was like, you want a ride to go see the movie? And I was like, yes, please. Please give me a ride to the movie theater. And he'd offered to come back and pick me up afterward. But I was like, that's too much to ask of the dude. And I only knew him so well at that point anyway. I think you're saying 97. So I went to work there in 96. So it'd been less than a year that I'd been working there. So he dropped me off at the movie theater. I watched the movie. I leave the movie theater and I got to walk all the way back. And us driving to that movie theater from where we lived would have been fine. Walking took a while, So I had a lot of time to think about this movie after I watched it. If I didn't have a vehicle, you were having trouble probably with your living situation then. You were probably still living in the same apartment complex as me, in fact. So we were walking everywhere in those days. So I can understand why that would not be a time that you'd particularly want to think about too much.
But that was all we did was see movies. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I had a whole collection
when we saw movies, that was a dollar show, or no, they were still first run then, right?
Hollywood was still first run.
Because they went from first run to like straight to Spanish language,
like that was
right?
where I saw Phantom Menace and all Matrix, all those movies. That was not.
That sounds right.
Dollar. I don't remember this movie at all.
Yeah, but you saw it TV, you saw it theater. You don't even remember?
I'm wondering, but see, it doesn't make sense that I didn't see it ever because I've seen all the other ones for the most part after this. Mm-hmm. What came after this one?
The one after
was it Prometheus,
probably Aliens versus Predator.
No, not counting AVP, but I saw that too.
Yeah. Well, remember they didn't do another one.
When
for
was
a long
Prometheus?
Time. Prometheus was like 2012.
And
or
then what
shit.
was it Prophecy or
that was Covenant? I think it was 2017.
Covenant.
Because literally in the video we watched, they talked about how they were going to do a new one. So that was the one they were referring to. So probably 2017. Though.
So see, I saw those. So why would I? And I've seen Aliens 1, 2, and 3. Why wouldn't I have seen this movie?
I'm sure you did see the movie. I'm sure it didn't make enough of an impression for where you remember where and how and to what degree.
Oh, and the underwater scene. I feel like that sounds familiar. Although I guess that could have been a trailer.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
It looks wild though.
Yeah.
I kind of want to watch it.
Okay. We'll come back to that then.
But the Alien Resurrection comics was another My Comic Shop purchase because they weren't available in the UK. What quite often happens outside the US is that the local publishers get the rights, and then if the film turns out to be a dead duck, then they just don't bother publishing anything, including the material that they've basically got for free included in owning the rights. So Alien Resurrection was one that myself and as a comic pro, I won't bother name dropping, but it was one of the customers from Gosh who was desperate to get hold of it. I had it on my radar to try and find for him for years.
Writer Jim Vance, artist Eduardo Risso, cover artist Dave McKean. Where's it Dave McKean?
Sure.
Is it painted?
No. I mean, there's a painted cover.
The covers
painted-ish cover.
Yeah, well, it's pretty cool art. Who wrote it? Writer Jim Vance.
That's it. I definitely remember the cover to number 2 at the shop.
Mm-hmm.
I remember this Russo guy. He's that Italian artist, right?
Oh yeah, you know Eduardo Rizzo.
Yeah. I like his stuff. He has a very distinctive style.
So then when I finally got it, and it was by Risso and the young Dave Stewart, or an early in his colouring career Dave Stewart, it makes it quite a unique comic, despite being like a South American artist rather than a European artist. I think that does colour the tone of the comic a bit more than if they'd just got, I don't know, Mel Ruby or Ron Lim or something to draw it. So it does have a very different feel to it to most Alien comics. And to be honest, it probably articulates the story slightly better than the film manages to do somehow, because it's less kind of visual overload, quite clear line work, and Rizzo's very good at what he does.
So why watch the movie when I can just read the book? Dang, that's a great art style. It's pretty faithful to the movie.
Yeah. But ultimately, the comic's just another adaptation that's just a little too faithful to the source material, so it doesn't actually add anything in your mind as a creative experience. But it looks pretty and sort of reinforces that the film probably isn't as bad as most people remember. Yeah, beyond Sigourney, like kissing strange white alien is a strange film, but not a bad film, just a strange film.
So how kooky is this movie?
Really kooky.
Like, I'm reading an old
Really
Reddit thread, and they say, it says in the commentary, they're talking to the director, Jean-Pierre Jejun, and he can be heard on the commentary track saying how something was zany and stupid because he's French, and the French love their zany and stupid, and that's why the thing in question was in the movie. So basically, just every dumb thing in that they point out in the commentary is dumb. He goes, "We are French, we love zany," and that's like it, and they move on.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it has more of that European sensibility than any of the other Alien movies, and it's interesting because Dan O'Bannon was so influenced by the European comics, specifically heavy metal, when he was doing the first Alien, right writing it. And the Aliens movies never really reflected that because Ridley Scott came in there and had that very British sensibility that much taking it completely seriously, seemingly in the first movie especially. And then you've got these French guys coming in, and I guess they see where the ideas came from, and they're almost like doing a pastiche of the heavy metal stories that would have inspired Dan O'Bannon more so than they were doing something that was faithful to what we'd established in the other Aliens movies, especially the extremely dour third movie. So yeah, that's an interesting perspective, and I think that you're right that they were coming from that comic booky place in a way that the other people involved with the production of these movies clearly were not.
Yeah, I think it gets a bad rap because a lot of people probably dialed out with Alien 3, and then Alien Resurrection, if anything, should have been like a regrouping and like, hey guys, we've still got this. And for me, it kind of was. It's still got that thing of like, Alien is a pretty elevator pitch concept, and there is some history, but just let people go for it. Fuck it. Just get good people to make interesting films following their vision. If they can get a load of Hollywood money to do it, fantastic, and just make stuff. And if this one's not any good, go for the next one. But I think the Alien franchise, by being so definitive between Jaws in space, followed by Vietnam in space, followed by what the fuck is this in space, I think Alien 4 probably had more of a responsibility to try and salvage the franchise with something that would get fans of the original two back in line without kowtowing. And I think what they achieved is something that's quite unique, but would never achieve that thing of getting specifically like US audiences on board, because it just feels like an art house film.
Well, and I see it compared to things like Fifth Element, and I think people forget Fifth Element didn't play in the States. It played internationally, but it didn't do terribly well in the States because it had that European sensibility. It had that sort of tongue-in-cheek quality to it, that element of whimsy that we don't particularly embrace. We want to believe in our myths. We're not able to see them as fantasy. We actually want to think that this is real stuff that we're watching. I think that hurts it as well. But it's a shame because one of the things I love about all four of the movies in the proper franchise, because a lot of people don't even count the Prometheus stuff. A lot of people just say the four. And what I appreciate about those first four movies is every one of them is very much reflective of the creator's vision. They're director-led movies, but there's definitely writers involved that have a major impact on the story as well. Often it's the same person, or well, at least in one instance, it's the same person. And I respect that, even though I'm not a fan of Resurrection either, but I respect that it at least has a vision. It at least has people who are trying to do something different. I love the idea of Aliens as an anthology where everybody tries to do, okay, what's our twist on this? How are we going to do something that's completely different than what anybody else did before? And afterwards, it just became another franchise. It's all the Aliens vs. Predator movies and even the Prometheus movies, the same thing. Let's try to do Alien again. Let's try to do Aliens and Predator and have it be true to both of the franchise's flavors and not go too far outside the lines. So you being a Joss Whedon guy, how much of the Whedon-esque do you get from the movie?
I mean, you have the strong female character. Mm-hmm. He likes teams, so definitely there's a team.
Well, Ron Perlman is basically playing a prototype of the Adam Baldwin character from Firefly. He's playing him differently because he's Ron Perlman and not Adam Baldwin, but he's playing the same guy, essentially. He's playing Jane, essentially, yeah.
You have your timid female character, which would be Winona Ryder. That'd be your Willow, who becomes a stronger character by the end of her arc.
Or your River Tam.
I mean, it's along the vein of a lot of his shows.
Yeah. Whedon doesn't like the movie, and what he says is they did not really change the script. They pretty much stuck with what he wrote, but all the line readings were wrong. That basically the tone, the intent was lost because of how they were directed or how they chose their performances. And so it's his words, but not the way he would have had them said.
Okay.
So do you think that's fair?
I don't know, because he would have maybe gone more comedic.
It's pretty comedic. It's a different kind of comedy. Like, he is a very verbal comedy guy.
Yeah.
Very sarcastic and bantery and stuff. The French director did not. He went broad. In particular, Dan Hedaya, for me, kind of ruins things because he's so big and so ridiculous.
Which one is that one?
He's the military captain.
The general?
Yeah, the general guy. And he's...
You mean Eddie?
From Cheers?
Cheers, yeah.
Yeah. He's a perfectly fine actor, comedic actor. He's good in other things. I can't deal with him in this movie, though. I've mentioned this many times in the past. You know that Ed O'Neill was in A Few Good Men, or filmed scenes for A Few Good Men.
I didn't know that.
He was playing a general, and he's part of the litigation process of the movie, right? He was in the original cut of the movie that they showed to audiences, the screening to see how people responded. And as soon as he was on screen, people started laughing. And he was not doing any comedy. They saw Al Bundy dressed as a general walking into the room, and it became a comedy for those scenes. And they said, "Oh, fuck this shit," and they cut him out of that movie. And when I watch Dan Hedaya in this movie, that's what I think of. I think that's it takes me right the fuck out of the movie because I can't stop seeing Dan Hedaya not be present in that world.
Well, because I don't know about the Ed O'Neill part, but the actor in this one that played the general,
I'll tell you what,
he basically plays himself in almost everything he does.
Yeah, he
has
plays the same character.
That scalding look.
Yeah.
It's not acting. He's just like...
He's a character actor. He plays the same character in everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. I would want to see someone who had a strong general military sense where he didn't come off as that way.
Yeah, he's too parodic. You know, he like you don't believe that he could be that, and you can't take him seriously, and therefore you can't take anything that's happening in the movie seriously.
I mean, when I saw him, I was kind of like, oh yeah, that's Eddie from Cheers.
Yeah, and then everybody's kind of going big too. So not my favorite.
But I think that's kind of the charm of the movie. Is it's so different from the other three. I don't want Aliens 2 Part 2.
Yeah.
I don't want to see Aliens again. Aliens 3, I remember being kind of scatterbrained because it didn't make sense sometimes.
Well, they chopped the shit out of the theatrical cut. It makes a lot. It makes a lot more sense, but it makes more sense and is more tonally consistent in the work print than it is in the theatrical, for sure.
I remember there's parts of the movie I liked a lot, like that Bishop and Newt were killed.
Yeah,
and
that was fucked up.
And she survived, but she only survived because the alien impregnated her and basically crashed the ship on purpose. I mean, stuff like that was kind of cool. The alien dog was kind of a weird thing, but I was like, okay, they adjust to their environment. The monks were kind of weird, kind of this weird prison colony. I remember enjoying it. Now this one, it felt more action.
Well, again, it was interesting because you did rank this one, Alien 3, you ranked third, right?
Yeah. But again, but it's still, I wanted something that's different.
Yeah.
Aliens,
and you're a Fincher guy. You're a pretty big Fincher guy.
Yeah.
Too.
And Aliens, the original Alien, I do like. I'm not saying it's a bad movie.
Yeah.
It's just such a slow burn.
Yeah.
That
well, and
gets
Resurrection moves, for sure.
Yeah.
And also, I think what's interesting about this, you as a heavy metal guy, and knowing that heavy metal was a big influence, and all those European creators were a big influence of what Dan O'Bannon was shooting for in the first Alien. And I think a lot of that downplayed quality that it has, that grounding quality it has, I think that's Ridley Scott. Because when you look at another Dan O'Bannon movie, like Return of the Living Dead, it's big in a way that this movie is big. And so I feel like if Dan O'Bannon had directed Alien, it probably would have been more like Alien Resurrection, because that feels like those crazy European comic books. It's more sexual, there's more nudity and near nudity, there's more extreme violence, there's broader characters, there's more weird, wonky sci-fi elements, like a guy who drives around on treads and shit like that. There's big cartoonish characters. They get the French director to direct them like it was a heavy metal story. It really has that heavy metal feel to it. So I think perhaps the movie is the most totally consistent with what Dan O'Bannon was going for the first time around, but as the non-director did not get to do himself. I think a lot of what we see as Alien comes through this prism of Ridley Scott's aesthetics, as opposed to the guy who actually came up with the idea and wrote the script and shit.
Yeah.
So do you think that maybe that heavy metal quality has an influence on why you like the movie so much? Because I think it's probably one of the it's
definitely pacing for me. Pacing. Yeah. Like I need to. I won't lie. I have to rewatch Alien again to really. Again, this ranking of mine is an old ranking.
But I can buy that with you though. I can see you I mean, I was a little surprised at how high you ranked it. I would not have thought you'd go with second place for Resurrection.
Oh no, I remember. And again, I need to rewatch it, but I remember really enjoying it.
Yeah.
I mean, the part where the aliens are trying to escape the pod and they pick the weaker of them and they start striking it. So the blood.
I thought that was really interesting.
I remember thinking like, oh wow, like they're fucking smart. Like they're like octopus. They figure out how to get out of the cage.
Well, and that's one of the things I love, because they set that up in Aliens, where Bill Paxton's character is talking about how these are dumb animals. How are you figuring this out? Well, maybe they're not so dumb.
Yeah.
You know,
the first one, it just hunts them.
They like sniff out who the weak one is, and they're like, okay, we're gonna kill you to make this happen. And he's like, no, not me. Like, no, yeah, you. You know.
And they start like striking it. Like again,
that was perhaps my favorite part of the entire movie, because I thought that
actually
was
my favorite part is when she sees all the clones and she's seen all.
That's
these
also a really
clones.
interesting sequence. I like that sequence.
I did like the fact that she was more aggressive, like more of a predator. She's a predator. Yeah.
You see that she's playing the alien.
And the thing is, the first Alien movie, the thing I guess I didn't like about it is it reminded me of a lot of horror movies where it's just a monster chasing them down.
Yeah.
Except this time it's
a slasher. It's basically Halloween.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Basically.
Yeah.
Where this one was a lot of sci-fi aspects. Again, the cloning. I remember that was really what got me, was the cloning. Like, oh wow, they're cloning her, and there's a lot of
crow in this movie too. It seems like there's a lot of crow in this movie, not just cast members, but in terms of vibe and aesthetics. There's a lot of leather. There's a lot of gunplay.
Yeah.
A lot of acrobatics that we're not used to.
I mean, honestly, when you see it, I'm immediately thinking like fucking Blade 2, where you have the blood gang or whatever, the vampire. Like they have this the whole Predators movie where you have fucking Arnold and his badass soldiers. Like that to me.
I was gonna say it looks like Predator met 12 Monkeys or something. That's what it looked. Just watching that recap is what it felt to me like. A weird foreign art house flick mixed with a mainstream property. It was very strange.
Yeah, so there's so much Guillermo del Toro, or so much of this is visible in Guillermo del Toro stuff, particularly Blade 2, and then Ron Perlman's in both. It's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure there's some influence there.
Yeah, and so I guess that's why I ranked it so high. It's a fun movie. Now, I want to rewatch it now. I'm actually probably going to watch it tonight, like when it gets late and the wifey goes to sleep, because I want to rewatch it, because I remember enjoying it a lot in the theater, but at the time I didn't like break down and analyze the film. It was just like, oh, that was a cool flick, and then it just moved on. Where Aliens was just like fucking watching G.I. Joe come to life, and like, fuck, that was awesome. And
I saw Aliens first, and I saw it theatrically. I have a clear bias, but yeah, you're right. The whole G.I. Joe aspect was certainly a huge appeal to me.
Because I remember seeing the first Aliens on TV in our kitchen as we were eating dinner on like the Sunday night movie, and I was a little like the chest burster scene scared me, but the rest of the movie was just kind of like you said, like Halloween. It was just something hunting them all down. I saw Aliens in the theater as well, and remember thinking, what the fuck is it, like when they're whipping out the fucking guns on the tripods and they're just like lighting up the shit. And I just remember thinking like, oh fuck it, because again, I had already seen Predator. Fucking love the military coming out and fucking tearing shit up. So I remember really liking that one. So then, yeah, I could see where like it played up.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but like literally, I saw Aliens cold. I'd not seen anything else, and then Alien came on TV, and I tried to watch that, and I fell asleep while it was playing. So that was my first experience with Alien. Was it being so boring that it put me to sleep at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. So obviously, I've grown older and I've grown to appreciate the first Alien, but my initial reaction was. Yeah. So I feel you.
Alien ruled. I've always loved Alien.
I've
even
come
when I
around.
was a kid, it scared the shit out of me.
Oh yeah.
And then I've told this story on the podcast before too. The Museum of Natural Science was showing it on their IMAX. I went to go watch a late night showing of Alien remastered IMAX, and it was Alien IMAX rules. It is so awesome. But it is. It's
I imagine it's very immersive, especially when they're on the planet.
You feel like you're in. Well, it feels like you're in the ship.
Yeah.
Like you feel like you're sitting at the table watching because they're so large. Like it was awesome. Highly recommend. If they ever show Alien and IMAX, go check it out.
The franchise got very boring after this one, and I think that's a shame.
Yeah, possibly in part as a reaction to this one. I mean, even these comics have got Dave McKean covers on them, you know.
I will say the first one's a truly terrible Dave McKean cover, though. This is, I think, one of the worst things he's ever done. This is so terribly this is so late 90s Photoshop experimentation. Like, I'm thinking about you being a defender of the coloring in Dark Knight Strikes Back and the choices made in that book. And it's like, this is that same kind of thing. It's like, let's do some stuff with computers. It's like, maybe don't. Maybe you're not quite there yet. Maybe don't show your experimentation don't show the work. Do the work at home and don't put it on the cover of a book. But I guess if you're going to do it, the adaptation of the movie Alien Resurrection is maybe the place to do it, I guess. But I remember when this came across my eyes the first time, and it just left them sore, I swear.
Yeah, I mean, that said, the second cover is pretty great. Even like the alien having an umbilical cord is a pretty striking thing when you think about it. It doesn't shove it down your throat, but this idea of an alien born, actually born of a human rather than just gestating in their chest or whatever, is pretty striking. Yeah, second one I like. The first one is a shocker. I don't know what was going on there, but overall, I mean, I think it's a valiant attempt. What's also quite interesting, I don't know if you're reading these in the omnibuses, in the issues you get a pin-up gallery, and I don't think it's coincidental that there are 2 issues and 2 pin-ups, suggesting that Risso was perhaps supposed to do the covers originally, and then they ditched him for Dave McKean and then just stuck his art in the back as extras.
They do say in the text that it was something he did before he was given the project. It's almost like it's like a trial run to get the project. Now that could be some face saving, you know, but the party line is that it was before he got the job. I like that you use the term valiant effort, because when I look at that first cover, what it reminds me of is I think like they did Acclaim Comics and Valiant did like adaptations of stuff like Magic the Gathering, and they were doing a lot of this sort of Photoshop-y stuff too in that time period.
Yeah.
That's what this first one looks like, is like something that they would have had on one of those awful books. books. The second one does look more like a McKean cover, but it still kind of looks like somebody doing McKean as opposed to the actual guy. But it's definitely a much better cover the second time around.
You mentioned Acclaim, and I'm thinking of those first Shadow Man covers as well. Ashley Wood getting the hang of things on those Garth Ennis Shadow Man covers.
Now, did you have any
similar sort of thing? No, go ahead.
Did you have any experience with Jim Vance?
No, and is there a Steve Vance as well?
Yeah, that's always thrown me. It's two different guys. I think that. See, I'm not even sure if Jim Vance is the one.
One did Uncle Sam with Alex Ross. I think that was Steve Vance.
May well. See, Jim Vance, the main thing he's known for is Kings in Disguise. And I don't think I ever read it. I remember it being really well regarded in the time period it was coming out. And I know that it got like good write-ups in Comics Journal and things like that. But I don't remember reading too much of it. And then he really didn't have a lot of mainstream work. So it's another one of those things where it's almost like he needed to pay rent. And it's like, okay, I'm trying to do my artsy-fartsy project. But if Dark Horse can underwrite that for a couple months, then I'd appreciate it. And it's a weird adaptation because what's on the page I think is pretty good. Like I think the dialogue, which may could be directly from the screenplay. I can't say because I haven't watched the movie in a few years now, about 8 years now. But the lines that are chosen are chosen well. I think the basics of the storytelling are good. It's just that it really does feel like somebody just took the script and chopped the key parts out of it, and then there was no bridging material. And so it's like what's there is good, but there's so much not there, and it's really, really apparent that it's not there. And it was bad enough when Marvel would take a motion picture and turn it into a 4-issue miniseries where you would still lose some stuff, but you still got the basic flow, the key elements. And then, as the format lost favor, as VHS became more prevalent, they started cutting it down to 3, and things really got choppy with 3. Trying to do this whole thing in 2 issues, this is clearly a souvenir rather than something that's intended to be narratively coherent.
Yeah, that's well put. And then I think the main thing for me that suffers is that Rizzo makes everything look attractive. Rizzo makes ugly things look attractive. And in that film, you've got Ron Perlman, who, is almost famous. I mean, the Beast, So Ron Perlman is there for his ugly face, basically, or his caricature face, let me put it that way. And then Rizzo draws him, probably doesn't have access to the likeness to actually, or doesn't have permission to use the likeness, just draws him as a meathead. The black guy with the dreads, the guy who's in all of Jean Genet's films, the little friend who's in the wheelchair, he's got like a really strong face, like crazy lips, but that just sort of gets diluted into Rizzo style. So all of the cool elements of the gang of smugglers, by the time Rizzo's drawing them, they're all a bit Rizzo and have lost all of that character. It all just disappears into like Rizzo soup, attractive but a big loss compared to what you see on screen.
I actually don't mind that because I still see enough. It's interesting because looking at a lot of these other licensed products that I've been looking at lately, particularly Aliens, but some other ones as well, they're almost like terrified of doing anything remotely resembling the actor, and so they go so far afield that you're like completely divorced. The Ron Perlman character obviously in no way resembles Ron Perlman, but he does resemble the character enough for me. I like the little Rank-Sarok spit girl he's got. I love the weird tire tread scar that he's got. So even though he doesn't look like Perlman, the character feels like they're reflected. It's not so far afield that I don't recognize this person. The guy with the dreads, he's clearly not the actor, because the actor's a pretty handsome guy. This dude, not so much, but it's still a black dude with dreads, so I know that that's who they're representing here. The French guy from Amelie and all the other flicks, I know that that's who that's supposed to be. He's obviously the closest. They're much more ciphers when it gets to Ripley and Call, the Winona Ryder character, but there's still enough of those actresses and how they look in the movie to where I know one from the other. Where one of the big problems that we had when we did the Alien 3 adaptation is there's a bunch of bald guys you can't differentiate from one from the other, At least I could tell who these characters are supposed to be. And they're also, again, they're drawn with panache. It just looks cool. It's like we had a joke when we did the Alien 3 episode, me and Derek, we don't want any of the pages. Like, the only reason why we would get a page is if we got all the pages so that we could have a complete set of something. We didn't want any particular page. Where this is just the opposite. There's not a single page in this book that I would not be happy to have. I'm trying to choose the one specific page that I want, and it's like, why bother? Just give me any of them. What I will say, though, is while everything looks super cool, I do think that part of what makes this book somewhat incomprehensible is that Rizzo's not trying to tell the story either. Rizzo is clearly trying to draw whatever will look cool in that panel, and there's so much stuff stuff that just doesn't translate. Like the ending of the movie where they flick the blood of the Sigourney Weaver character, the clone of Ripley, onto a window, and then the hole creates a vacuum that sucks the alien into it, the hybrid alien. Looking at that, the comic book, there's no way that you would get that from what they show you. You know that the alien creature died somehow, but it doesn't make any sense within that context.
Can I just say that the reason why she's so horny is because her pussy has acid in it and she can't get fucked. That's my headcanon. Why wouldn't it be?
Because she's a queen and she wants to produce eggs?
I guess, but she couldn't do it with humans.
Dude, you're getting served left and right today.
When the character comes across all the failed clones, which is a very, memorable scene in the movie, you don't know what's happening on the comic book page. She's just looking at a bunch of things in tanks. There's nothing there to tell you that these are failed Ripleys and that she should feel any sort of kinship to them. There's a ton of that. There's the bit where Ripley rips out the jackhammer jaw as a souvenir, and it's not explained well at all visually, not just in the storytelling, but just visually. It's like, why did you do that? What's going on here? It doesn't matter though, because if you're not going to have this be 3 or 4 issues to properly tell a story, it's not a good adaptation. So why bother? And I feel like that's kind of what Risso did. He's like, why am I going to bother to try to make this coherent? It's not. I'm just going to make everything look fucking cool. And to me, that almost gives it more value. It's like this. I would much rather have this 2-issue miniseries to just as an art book, just to look at his work, than for it to be an adaptation of an Aliens comic.
Yeah, no, it's fair point. And that the scene you mentioned about the blood on the glass, that stood out to me when I reread it in preparation for this. I feel like the whole thing of Sigourney being cloned, Ripley being cloned, and then the aliens being sort of cloned from that, like all of that is so muddled as a concept anyway, that trying to articulate it on 44 pages, I assume, as opposed to like 2 hours, is even more difficult to achieve than in the film. And to be honest, I don't think they articulate it particularly well in the film either. But in the comic, it feels like, warning, you must have seen the film previously to understand the comic you're about to read. It should come with like a little advisory on it to let you know that you're not really going to understand it.
I really feel like this should have been a mini comic that came with a DVD, and it's also, it reminds me of like, they used to have the photo magazines where they wouldn't tell you the whole story, but they just give you a whole bunch of pictures and interviews and give you just a general sense of what the movie was without ideally giving too much in the way of spoilers. And that's what this feels like too, where we're going to give you enough so that your memory berries will fire up, especially years down the line, but you can't read this and have it be a coherent story on its own.
Yeah, and as we're talking about it makes me want to watch the film again, so that's something. But yeah, as a comic, it's fine. I mean, Rizzo's great. Fortunately, Dave Stewart is also great. He was like the top percentile of colorists that could have possibly colored it, and he did. It would have been a different affair if it had been colored by many others, so at least there's that.
Yeah.
I got a question, Frank. Can the xenomorphs live in space?
I think so, at least for a period of time. I think that
they don't need oxygen then, or they can.
So we don't really know if they need oxygen. Typically, the ship's afterburners are what takes care of the alien.
Remember the Queen gets thrown into space.
They always get thrown into space. In almost every alien movie,
do they technically survive it?
If you look at the comic books, it seems like they can survive for at least a while in space. Now, the common misperception is that you explode or you freeze, where a human can actually stay out in space for a little while.
Well, think about it. If they have blood, if they have acid for blood, then they don't need oxygen because they don't have cells. It's blood. It's acid.
Okay.
So they're probably just pumping liquid in with. So you just need the heart to keep pumping the acid. They don't have blood, so I don't think the blood's carrying oxygen in it.
Yeah, I mean that's a possibility, but also we've seen, like I said, humans can survive in space for a while, longer than is given credit for. I think the main problem with humans in the void of space, besides you do eventually need oxygen pretty quickly, but also the exposure to cosmic rays. You're getting pelted with radiation, so that's probably going to get you in the long run. The time we've seen aliens outside has not been so long that we could definitively say whether they could or could not survive, but they seem like they're pretty hardy, and I think they probably could for at least a little while. Yeah, and like you said, their physiology is so different from ours.
Yeah,
that they may not have those needs.
I mean, I figure they just cut up into a ball and just kind of like wait until they hit something and then wake up and try to. Because I don't know,
because they seem like they can hibernate indefinitely too.
Yeah,
and obviously we have no idea of how long the eggs can just sit there. So if they don't need any kind of nutrition, if they're able to just go into a stasis and not have any immediate needs, as long as they're not moving, as long as they're not expending energy and stuff.
Because I remember the big deal about the second one was that they were terraforming the planet, which meant they were bringing oxygen to the planet.
Right.
So did that reawaken them?
No, because we already have the egg activate in the first movie before any terraforming's taken place. Now, obviously, there was an atmosphere. It wasn't bereft of atmosphere. We saw things like winds and stuff, I think, in the first movie. So it just was a different atmosphere, and it's not seemingly one that's support human life. That's why they're all in space.
So no comic has ever tried to address this. No book has ever tried to address this.
In the comics, we've seen aliens outside for long periods of time.
Okay.
But I don't think they've definitively stated that they can be out in the
Kind of like
exposure of space indefinitely.
I'm thinking Star-Lord clock here, where he can like be in space.
Yeah.
Where he can survive something that most people could not survive.
I'm confident that they'll get all the way through the Coconut Song and they'll be okay.
Okay.
This particular adaptation isn't terribly well traveled. I don't know if it made it into the omnibus because I didn't make it that far into the omnibuses. I'd have to ask Odell since he got the third volume. What I can say is there was a French edition, and they bypassed the Dave McKean covers, and they actually went with the splash page from the second issue for the cover of the French edition, and in black and white. I don't think that they had the colors in the French edition. I think it's a black and white showcase, which would be really interesting on its own because this material would look really interesting in black and white. I do like the Dave Stevens colors though. Yeah, that's the one. Mm-hmm.
Well, Ripley and crew walking onto a ship as the cover.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, I guess you don't need an alien on an alien comic. That's pretty ambitious.
Yeah. What page would you want out of these two issues? Because certainly I would think that given, especially since this was used as a cover, this image would be on the short list.
Yeah, I mean, it's great, but it hasn't got an alien on it. So I'm going for the page towards the end where we finally get to see Ripley's baby in silhouette. It's got some chains on it, some pretty big alien iconography, good figure drawings, that sort of Steranko thing that Risso does with the line work, that later Steranko, and the alien looks better there than he did in the film. So I'll take it as he managed to elevate the material, at least on one page.
I like the last page of the first issue. Just something, it just had that Ripley vibe to it. I dug that. It's just where she's holding the gun and looking back at the people. I also really like the second page of the second issue just because I dig the staples on Ron Perlman's face, and I like that most of the actors are represented on that page and they look as close as they do to the actors. But I think that the staple scar loses something without that Dave Stewart thin brown line to give it a little extra depth. So I'd probably go with the last page of number one for myself. But I do really love the abstract techno stuff from the splash page of the second issue. It definitely recalls Steranko and Frank Miller, and you even have that little bit of a gear that sort of recalls an Alien Tale. But ultimately, I'm going to want Ripley on her own as opposed to all these other guys that I never cared about.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Next time you go first, because because it's only I'm going back through it. I'm like, yeah, no, there are loads more, but that full baby alien, like weird alien in silhouette will do me. And there's something about aliens and chains. Maybe that's. I feel like Geiger didn't do that so much, but it seems to resonate with me.
That was Fincher, and as I recall, you came in with Alien 3 and then went backwards, right?
That's right.
And again, you got the chains in Alien Alchemy. That's a Fincher thing, and that's another area where his legacy is still in place, even into that book.
Yeah. So mentioning the Super Nintendo video game of Aliens 3 again, I think that's full of stuff. That's full of great audio. Like if you find somebody playing through that on YouTube or something, there's probably stuff that you could grab out for your production on these, which is always excellent. I think I've mentioned it before. I thoroughly enjoy it. There's some great audio, and I really enjoy playing that game. But I think I could probably sit and watch somebody play it on YouTube as background. It's like real comfort food for me. Big sounds in the music that don't fit with Super Nintendo normally. I don't quite know how they achieved it. So if you still haven't checked that out, you should.
Now, did the game have its own score? And is that what you're referring to, or do you also want the sound effects, the gun effects, screams, that kind of thing?
So the screams and guns, I think, are sampled from the films, whereas the music, if it's from the films, it doesn't strike me as being from the films, because they would have had to orchestrate it for the Super NES sort of chipset or whatever. But it's a really big full sound with scenes. Yeah, it's taking liberties with the story. It doesn't follow the story of the game at all. It's not that kind of video game. It has a central map that has levels coming off of it, and then you have a mission, and it may well be that your mission is to get something from the top room of the map and something from the bottom right room of the map. So you have to go into one room, fight all these aliens, retrieve this one thing thing, then find your way back out, navigate all the way through to the bottom corner to get something else, and then find your way back to a computer to get your next mission. It's quite involved. Some might think it's quite repetitive, but there's a particular refrain in the music which maybe I'll see if I can find and send to you. But there's a thing in the music which just excites me no end. And then when you die, you get a giant 16-bit alien head, and borrowing from aliens, game over, man, which is just so satisfying. Even though you're dead, you're like, it's fine as long as I can hear that.
One of the nice things about the retro gaming is that a lot of these guys have gone back, they've run this stuff through emulators, and they'll take the game and they'll break it into pieces. So a lot of times you'll have a MIDI file where it's got all the music in just one little downloadable file. So I could probably dig that up pretty easily. So I'm going to look into that. Plus, I like having variety. I like having different music. So that gives me an opportunity to pursue another avenue, because like the plan with Alchemy was to just throw the Alien 3 soundtrack on there, because I don't think I've used that since the original Alien 3. But I could just as easily go looking for that MIDI file and see if I can run that either on one of the episodes. I'm not sure if it'll be Alchemy but it'd be nice to have something new to listen to in the background. So I'm going to seek that out.
Yeah, and the soundtrack's particularly good. So as you're going through it, you pick up rockets, machine gun, and flamethrower, and then the different aliens make different sounds when you kill them. So you got this great music, this kind of big, I don't know, Howard Shore kind of dun 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 dun, like this big kind of orchestral thing. It doesn't do the Jerry Goldstein, is it? It does
Horner?
Alien.
James Horner, wasn't it?
You got James Horner does one of them. I think does Aliens.
Okay, yeah.
But then on the video game, you've got the big music, but then as you're going through it, you're shooting with alien sound effects, and as you're killing stuff, it's screaming, screeching. So it's sort of filling out the soundtrack with the sound effects. I love it, and I think you get a kick out of it if you can find it.
Yeah, and the more I think about it too, there's an awful lot of alien attacks throughout Alchemy. So just randomly having an alien scream popping up every now and again seems like it'd be a good fit anyway.
Yeah, if I could find a way to facilitate it for you, I would. I've got it on my Super Nintendo Mini, but yeah, if you can't find anything, let me know.
I suspect, like you said, worst case scenario, I'm sure there's a playthrough, but I'll try to find something a little bit cleaner than that, especially because some of these guys feel this need to talk through their playthroughs. It's like, I'm not here for your commentary.
Oh my god, look at this guy, this alien. Oh.
And who are Billet Spy Rhino, Billy Hines, Comics Enabler, who added Xenomethadone for my alien Jones, quote, Jonesy, Chris Dunford, Chris Lyon, Comics and Such, Dave's Comic Heroes Blog, Derek W.C., Dirk Ashton, Ed Moore at Teal Productions, Enjoy Refreshing What? Hal Colbeck, Iris Joe Wells, The Irredeemable Shad, James T. Productions, Julie Raoul, who added, hey, the Jamie Lee Curtis movie watched a lot as a kid, Keith G. Baker, Lamar Redinger, Lorenzo Sleestack, Mean Stealing Raccoon, Mentally Chill, Mephisto 2102, Petrus Gaspar, Sin Titulo, Superbound, Talk Nerdy to Me, Trash Fiction Championship, William Lounge, and Xander Lee.
This has been a Rolled Spine podcast. All audio samples are believed covered under fair use laws. No copyright infringement is intended.